In this video, we'll introduce the idea of square root. Some square root problems are very easy, and you can do them in your head, like number 1. The square root of 16 is just 4. Why is that right? Because 4 times 4 is 16. Square roots are just the opposite direction of squares. The square root of 16 is 4 because 4 squared is 16. The square root of 100, well, that must be 10, because 10 times 10 is 100. If 10 squared is 100, then the square root of 100 is 10. What number times itself gives you 25? Well, that's 5. The square root of 25 is 5. Now, the square root of 256, well, that's a big number. I could guess. Or we could use a calculator for a little help. Now, my calculator this way doesn't have a square root button on it. But if I take it and turn it, now we've got more buttons, including a square root button. Depending on your calculator, your square root button may work a little different than mine. You'll have to play with it and find out the way to make it work great. I want the square root of 256. On this type of calculator, you type in the 256 first, and then you find the square root button. Here's my square root button right there. I'll hit that square root button, and the square root of 256 is 16. Why is that right? Because 16 times 16 is 256. Now, on your calculator, you might have to hit the square root button first. You might have to go square root, then type in 256, then hit equals. On this calculator, I type in the 256 first, and then hit the square root button. Just depends on your calculator. Number 5 looks tricky, but this one's not so bad. I can do this one in my head. I'll take the square root of 1 in the top, and I'll take the square root of 9 in the bottom. The square root of 1 is just 1, because 1 times 1 is 1. And the square root of 9, that's 3, because 3 times 3 is 9. So the square root of 1/9 is 1/3. Same thing works for number 6. If you're taking the square root of a fraction, that's equal to the fraction of the square roots. The square root of 4 is 2. The square root of 49 is 7. So the square root of 4 over 49 is 2 over 7. When you're working homework problems like these, there's no need to show any work. You write the problem down, you put the answer next to it. Even on 5 and 6, you can just write the problem down and put the answer right next to it. Now, these are a little different. The square root of 6, I can't find a number that I can multiply times itself and get 6. So the best I can do is use a calculator to approximate the square root. When I do that, I'm going to get a very messy decimal, and I'll have to round it off. For this part of the homework, I'd like you to round your answers to the nearest thousandth. Now let's make a note. The number 1,000 has 3 zeros. So when I round to the nearest thousandth, I'm rounding to 3 decimal places. I'll need a calculator to help. For the square root of 6, on this calculator, you type in the 6, then you hit the square root button. Now remember, on your calculator, you might have to hit the square root button first, then the 6, then the equal sign. My calculator gives me this crazy decimal. Let me write part of it down. 2.4494. 2.4494. Now that's not a great answer yet, because the instructions were to round to the nearest thousandth. So I'll have, for a better answer, the square root of 6 equals. The number 1,000 has 3 zeros. 3 zeros means 1, 2, 3 place values. Now check the next place value out. And if that's 4 or smaller, then this does not round up. So to the nearest thousandth, we're 2.449. See how my answer has 1, 2, 3 place values. That matches the 1, 2, 3 zeros in the number 1,000. Let's try number 2. The square root of 21. First, I'll let my calculator get the square root of 21. It's a messy decimal. 4.5825. Now for my best final answer, I am supposed to round this off to the nearest thousandth. That's 3 zeros, means 3 place values. Check the next place value out. It's a 5. That's big. If this is 5 or larger, then that rounds up. So I'll have 4.58, round the 2 up to a 3. There's my best answer to the nearest thousandth. Now when you do your homework, all you write down is the problem and the answer rounded to the nearest thousandth. No need to write this down. It's sitting right here on your calculator. You can simply look at your calculator and say 1, 2, 3 place values, check the next one out. It's large, so I round that 2 up to a 3. Here comes number 3. The square root of 95. I'll type in 95, find the square root. It's 9.7467. So my best final answer, rounded to the nearest thousandth. 1, 2, 3 place values. Check the next place value out. 7 is large, so round that up. 9.74, round that up to a 7. The square root of 95 to the nearest thousandth is 9.747. Square root 12. My calculator gives me an approximation of 3.4641. To the nearest thousandth, that's 3 place values. Check the next place value out. That's small, so that stays a 4. Again, when you do your homework problems, all you need to write down is the problem and the answer rounded to the nearest thousandth. All right, time for you to go do some homework. I'll see you later on today.